What is an adult problem that nobody prepared you for? Childbirth. That is rough. I always wanted kids since the dawn of my existence, so when my wife got pregnant, it was fantastic news. We took classes, prepared the room, and got everything in place. On the day my wife's water broke, we thought we were ready. Everything went smoothly, up until hour 22. The doctor came in after 3 hours of pushing. She was concerned that the baby's heart wasn't doing well, so we prepped for an emergency C-section. Let me break this part down because this wasn't covered in the classes I took. The decision to have a C-section is really taken away from you pretty quickly, and there most likely isn't time to explain why natural birth is no longer an option. They may quickly go over the scarring left and how it will impact future pregnancies, but again, there isn't much time. As the husband, it felt like I was moving at half speed while everyone else was at 2 times speed. They tell you to put on pseudo-scrubs and wait in the hallway while your spouse gets prepped. 15 minutes later, you're walked into the OR. Okay, resuming the story. I walked into the OR, a team of people were there, and it's bright. They take me to my wife, and I tell her it's all going to be okay. I'm scared. She's scared. And the anesthesiologist is surprisingly cheerful. He says, "In 20 seconds, you're going to be a dad. Get your phone out." There's a blue curtain that covers my wife so I don't see the surgery happening. When the moment comes where they're going to pull out the baby, the doctor moves the curtain, but the surgeon doesn't pull him out. He's stuck. A minute passes and still no baby. The pitch in the room begins to crescendo, and I feel an even bigger sense of dread. Meanwhile, my poor, exhausted wife is being thrown around like a rag doll. The anesthesiologist puts the curtain down, and now there's a lot of yelling. The doctors are trying everything to save my son, but his arm is wrapped around his neck, and they're forced to not only make a deeper initial C-section, but also make an additional C-section within my wife's uterus to try and dislodge my very stuck son. Finally, they pulled out my boy. He doesn't cry. They keep moving him, and he's barely responsive. After a couple of very intense movements, we hear the sound. I cry. My heart was both elated and crushed at the same moment, because the life of my son pushed the term I use for love into a whole new stratosphere, and in that moment, I knew I would never love something as deeply again. At that moment, they told me I had to either stay with my wife, who was still being operated on, or go with my son to the NICU. It felt like an impossible decision. My wife is stronger than any human I've ever known, and at that moment, she told me to go with our son. I gave her a kiss and went to the NICU. A couple hours later, she was moved to the recovery room. When they wheeled her to the room, the attendant allowed us to go to the NICU, and my wife was able to meet and hold her son for the first time. It was then that I knew that she would never love anything more than our son again. Story 2. Being sued by the guy who crashed into me from behind. My wife doesn't want a dash cam, but I'm going to get some eventually. It's great advice. We've had other accidents since, but that was the most consequential. However, the accident was in 1980, so it was not something I could have prepared for. So, story time? 'Twas the night before Thanksgiving, and I was giving a friend a ride home from his gas station job. We were approaching their driveway, my former housemates at a rented house. Making a left turn, there was a car coming toward us from around the curve, an unlit 2-lane country road. Just past that, so I stopped in front of the drive to let him go by. I saw his lights, but I couldn't tell how fast he was coming. Then I see high beams in the mirror, 4 headlights coming fast. I try for the driveway because I still have a second. I pop the clutch and turn the wheel, but I'm driving a 1971 VW camper with a 45 horsepower engine, so it's not like I'm burning rubber. Meanwhile, the guy behind me actually tried to pass, going at least 60 to 70 in a 55, saw the oncoming car and tried to pass me in the right. But there was a guardrail right there because of a culvert or something, and he tried to wedge his car between us. So I get my van to about a 45-degree angle and it catches my right rear corner. I wind up rolling into the ditch on the other side of the road and flipping into it, landing head up, facing the direction we came from. They took us to the nearby hospital to check us, and a cop gave me a ticket for not signaling a left turn. I told him I signaled, but I didn't know how I could prove it, so I didn't fight the ticket later. The hospital let us go, and I'm still kicking myself for not demanding he get tested for alcohol. A month or so after paying the ticket, I find out he's suing me for $100,000 for injuries. Not fighting a moving violation, it's NY State, lets him claim it was my fault. I should have gone to a lawyer, but I was good and broke at the time. My insurance company got a lawyer, but it didn't get that he was working for them. Not me. At the deposition a year later, he barely remembered what happened in the accident and could improve pain and suffering. But they didn't even try to shoot down his claims. Finally, before the trial date, 2 years later, they settled for $5,000. My policy said they could only penalize me a little bit if they had to pay out less than $50,000. So it was minimal, except that I only had liabilities, so I was out of the cost of an old van. I should have sued him, but I was young and inexperienced and just wanted to move on. In fact, a friend had an almost identical 71 camper and was selling it right then, so I bought that. The actual conclusion, 5 months after the settlement, he ran off the road and met his end. So I regret 2 main things. giving the oncoming car too much time and not getting a lawyer to fight the ticket and go after him for the cost. By the way, the guy was a local business dry cleaner owner, and his store was right next to the station of the trooper that gave me the ticket. Story 3. In 2010, I buried my brother. I handled everything as my mother couldn't, and my father didn't want anything to do with it. My other brother lives too far away to actually handle it, so it fell on me. 2012, divorced and bankrupt in the same month. My 3 stepkids stayed with me as their mom went AWOL chasing another man across the country. Their real dads didn't step up, so she left them with me. They call me their parent, not their real ones. And I lost my job all in the same month, mind you. 2013. I lost my father. I dealt with all that, including a farm and a probate court for 2 years to finalize everything. Again, my other brother lives too far away to be super helpful. He helped when he could. Yes, I'm still raising stepsons at this time, too. Fast forward 2016. My mother falls into bad health, super strained and worried. The next 4 years were in and out of hospitals, near deaths, and super crappy senior health care. Sorry, folks. The USA doesn't care about what you have done, just what you can do. It took on the government, the state, anyway, over health care. It ended badly. 2019, September. One of my kids offed a friend in a driving accident. Another almost injures someone, gets arrested, and is put in jail. I also completely evicted my ex, the mother of the kids, including my daughter. I always keep the door open for the kids' sake, though, but that's a whole different kind of crazy story. 2020. One of my kids is in prison. I lost my mother. She had a heart attack, and her organs shut down in January. Looking back, I'm pretty sure she had the virus, but we as a country knew nothing about it at the time. I lost one of my best friends in February. Then it hit. My mother contracted it. May 28th, 2020, 8:30 a.m., my ex-mother-in-law succumbed to cancer in her home, pulled back into my driveway at 8:40. My mother passed away at the ward. I had my grandson with me at home, so I didn't take a chance to see her. I had not seen her since February. We all said goodbye on the phone. As for my mom-in-law, I got to say goodbye to her in person, but the cancer had run its course, so she looked at me with blank stares. Long story short, nothing prepares you for life. It just happens. Good or bad, we deal, we get knocked on our bums, but we get back up and continue on. I consider myself a good parent, but nothing prepared me for trying to talk to my oldest stepson when he accidentally offed someone. It was hard to find words for that, let alone someone he knew, but I did my best. It is difficult to find words to describe any of the above, but I did. Nothing my mother ever taught me prepared me for any of that, but she did raise me with a ton of compassion and empathy. Story 4. The number of decisions I have to make. As a kid, you never have a lot of choice in what's for dinner and what to do on the weekend, where you live, your household income, what to do when your vehicle makes a funny noise, etc. Now that I have to look after all those things, I just wish someone would come along and tell me what to do half the time. Thankfully, I created a nice little system to deal with all that stuff. Whenever something comes up that I have to do, like making vehicle repair appointments or repairing the car myself, buying myself new clothes or calling the doctor, I write it down on my running to-do list and probably forget about it. I also have a weekly list of household needs. When I run out of something, I put it on the list. Every weekend, I make a meal plan for the upcoming week by selecting from a recipe book I've built up over time. Then put in a Walmart pickup order for all the ingredients plus the things on my running shopping list. I picked up the order after work on Monday. Every weekday, I have a daily routine. When I get back from work, I work out for 30 minutes, stretch and shower for 30 more, make dinner, and eat it. Spend an hour taking care of the things on my to-do list. Take 2 hours to work on hobbies, spend quality time with my boyfriend or relax with video games or a book, spend 30 minutes tidying the house, then go to bed. On weekends, I usually take care of my social needs by hanging out with friends or family or spending some time in nature. I'm autistic, so perhaps my routine is a little more rigid than other people might like, but perhaps you can take some inspiration from it. It's a whole lot easier to set up a routine and stick to it than it is to try to use your motivation or good sense to figure out what to do all the time. Story 5. What to do to survive when you have hit the very end of everything possible for you to do with regards to the basics of life. I was in a very bad accident about 3 years ago when I broke my back in 3 places. I got a wonderful traumatic brain injury that affects me more now than ever since the accident, chronic excruciating back pain, PTSD that I can't explain, panic attacks that come out of nowhere, migraines, and a few gastro issues as well. Needless to say, keeping a job is rough. Finding a job I can trick myself into thinking I can do long enough to survive the month is rough enough with the issues I'm left with. Keeping one that allows me to take an occasional sick day due to an unforeseen issue that may have started that morning, migraine, nausea, extreme lethargy, or short temper or patience with simple tasks when they don't go well. I used to be the first guy to start a project and the last one to stop working on it. I used to read a book a week, cook wonderful dinners, and go out with my friends every weekend, whether it was to concerts, movies, or at a bar. I haven't done anything like that since the weekend before the accident. I had to move back in with a roommate at 30 plus years old, and I have been denied any government assistance to get my feet back under me. And as of writing this, I have negative $14.32 in my bank account and exactly 4 meals left in my cupboards. I'm sure I'll figure something out because that's what I have to do. And please understand that I'm not saying this stuff for any kind of pity. If one person hears this, understand that your life can and will change in an instant, no matter how young you are. Try to prepare at least a little bit for the future. No one prepares you to be helpless. There's no manual for what happens when everything goes wrong. Try to think of the things you could never think of. Story 6. People aren't joking when they say they're whatever age they're physically, but internally they're still a different age. I'm 32, so hardly old, but internally I'm no different from when I was 20. Your body ages, but your mind doesn't go beyond a certain point. It makes it all the more tragic when you interact with elderly people with cruel illnesses like dementia reaching their final days. You see a decrepit, frail old person gasping their last breath, but inside they're still themselves in their younger years when they stopped aging mentally. Whether they're able to express it anymore or not through the illness, inside themselves they're still 20-something, but their body is shutting down and their mind is telling them things they can't understand, and that scares them. It's hideous to watch someone you love go through that. You do generally start to wish you could just put an end to it and relieve them of that unspeakable suffering. Of course, you can't do that, but that's why I'm a fervent supporter of elective merciful release for humans via services like Dignitas. I stood by my grandmother, who was struck down with vascular dementia, too long hearing her begging me to just help her end it so she could be at peace, and with her late husband to hold any misguided opinions and the mercy of letting a suffering person go. The poor woman spent another 10 years bedridden in that state. To me, that's far more cruel than just letting her go like she wants. She was ready to go, and she was begging to be with her husband. Being in that position and being unable to help her was just hideous. Finding these adult problems relatable? Stay updated in all our future videos by smashing those like and subscribe buttons and never miss out on our next story time. Story 7. Taking one's own life. My situation. Mom and Dad were divorced years ago, so my mom had no authority over anything. My sister was not legally my dad's daughter. He raised her along with me, so she couldn't do much of anything with the legal realm. My brother and Dad hadn't spoken for years, so you can figure that one out on your own. When I got the phone call in the middle of the night from my mom, I instantly knew whose job it was going to be. Mine. I was right, and it sucked. It took a full year to deal with kicking out his piece of crap girlfriend and her kids, trying to fix up his house to sell, which was 30 minutes away, and all the legal mumbo-jumbo with everything else. I told my mom she better have her crap together because I will not fix up another house again. I will walk away. Trying to grieve during all that mess was impossible, so I planned to grieve sometime in the fall of 2022 or 2023. I planned to take a sabbatical for a month and let it all out by myself on another continent. No husband, no kids, almost no phone. Me, nature, and a beautiful place, and time to make peace with my dad and spirit without distractions. I almost have enough saved up. I've been planning it for a long time now. By next fall, at the very least, I should have enough to go. I can't get here fast enough. Story 8. Pareto Law. The life for 80% of people will stink. I heard all these stories about people who are making it, having a great life, working at Google, etc., and would think that it wasn't that hard to achieve when I was young. Since I was above average, I wouldn't have to worry. Well, the truth is that only the top 10%, 5%, or 1% will get the type of life you wish for. Being above average isn't enough, so you better start now going hard. Don't listen to those who think you're trying hard, or even those who think what you're doing is enough. It is probably not enough for the life you dream about. You may have to sacrifice some time when you're young, but when you make it as an adult, it will be so much more worth it. While most of the people will be struggling. Aim for the stars and start doing it now. Don't wait until later. You gotta be working harder than most, otherwise you'll end up like most. Look around. Is this the life you want for yourself? Walk around and look at the average person. This is how you will end up if you don't act. Have some urgency. Ignore the boomers who tell you to take it easy and make it sound like it will happen. It will happen because you worked hard and then you can take it easy afterwards. But have some fun in the process as well. Being young is an amazing experience that you will never have again. There are things that only make sense at that age, but work hard. Story 9. The fact is, it's all a facade. Adults aren't really more mature than most teenagers or 20-somethings in their early years. They just have more responsibilities to tend to and can't indulge in all the stupid stuff they used to. Sure, some grow out of hobbies or interests, but for every person who acts super mature, I know people who are basically responsible 15-year-olds. My dad sure was one. Anyway, we all have different personalities. Sure, you might grow and change as you get older, but let's not pretend that there aren't adults out there who still love kids' shows, comic books, playing with toys with their children, or who never grew up. And inversely, that there were kids who worked 2 jobs, went to school, and raised their brothers and sisters. I think the difference in maturity you're expecting to see as you grow up is a falsehood people profess because no one really knows how to explain adulthood and growing up and sacrificing time and interests for survivability or necessity. Story 10. The fact that old age body problems can begin to manifest as early as your late teens, gray hairs, balding, aching joints, beer gut, worse eyesight, yeah, this can all start to happen even before you finish puberty. Some 25-year-olds look almost 40, though no fault of their own. It's a pretty big wake-up call when you start to look like your mom or dad only a few years after you finish high school. It's a surprise to see that face, the face of a grown-up, looking back at you from the mirror. It reminds you that even though it doesn't feel like time has passed, you're not a kid anymore. You're not even a young adult anymore, really. You realize that you'll probably be a parent after the same amount of time passes again. You'd better get a real job, get a proper place to live, plan your romantic life in the long term, and start putting money away for the future. Because it comes around quicker than you think, and it won't wait for you to grow up first. Don't believe me? Just look in the mirror and see how much you recognize the person looking back. Story 11. Enjoy your parents while you still have them. I lost both of mine before I was 18. My mom took her life when I was 13, and my dad passed away 2 weeks after my high school graduation when he collapsed due to kidney failure and spent the last 2 weeks of his life in an induced coma. He was only born with one kidney and he had drinking problems. My mom was 44 and my dad was 49. I no longer know what either of their faces look like without looking through photo albums, and the sounds of their voices are but a very faint whisper that I rarely experience anymore. Love them, and always leave or end a conversation in good terms. The last words I said to my mom were horrific, and then I never saw her again. Just to make the most of the time you have left with them, and be sure that you don't just tell them you love them. Make them feel loved. Love and light to all of you. So, these pesky grown-up problems, do they really go away? We've got plenty more real talk coming your way, so stay tuned. And hey, speaking of adult struggles, if you're in the mood for some relatable content, be sure to check out our next video titled, What's the Worst Feeling Ever? These two videos cannot be more related. They're like twins. Do me a favor and don't miss story 2. See you there.